My name is Zov Min Tan, and my story begins in a place most people have never heard of, a small village in the heart of Myanmar. The village was the kind of place where time seemed to move slowly. Every morning, the mist rolled in from the distant hills, wrapping the bamboo houses in a soft, pale haze. The air smelled of damp earth, wood smoke, and freshly cooked rice. Chickens wandered freely between the houses, pecking at the ground, while children with bare feet and bright eyes played in the dusty paths, their laughter carrying through the air. But beneath this peaceful image was a harder truth. Life in the village was a constant battle for survival. Most families, including mine, lived day to day, never knowing if tomorrow would bring enough food. Our house was small and fragile, wooden planks held together with nails that had long since rusted, and a roof patched with pieces of old tin. When the heavy monsoon rains came, water would leak through the cracks and drip into metal bowls we kept inside. My father, a farmer, worked the rice fields from sunrise to sunset. His hands were always rough and covered in small cuts from the sharp edges of the plants. My mother was the heart of our home. She cooked, cleaned, tended to our small vegetable patch, and cared for me and my two siblings. I was the youngest, small, skinny, and curious about the world. My older brother often helped my father in the fields, while my sister stayed home to help my mother. I loved school, even though it was far from perfect. The walls of the classroom were cracked, the wooden desks wobbled, and the textbooks had been passed down so many times that the covers were faded and the pages torn. But to me, school was magical. Every word I learned, every story I read, was like a key to a bigger world. Still, I knew my parents were worried. Education was important, but so was survival, and survival often won. When I was 15, everything changed. My father came home one evening looking unusually tired. He said nothing as he sat down on the wooden floor, his breathing heavy. My mother brought him tea, but he barely touched it. Over the next few days, he became weaker. At first, we thought it was just exhaustion from the fields, but soon he could barely stand. There was no hospital nearby, only a small clinic with limited medicine. My father needed more than they could offer, but the nearest hospital was far away, and we didn't have the money for the journey or the treatment. I watched helplessly as his strong hands, the same hands that had built our home, planted our crops, and carried us through storms, grew thin and shaky. One morning, before the sun had risen, I woke to the sound of my mother crying softly. My father was gone. That day, the world felt heavier. I was no longer just a boy. I had to be a man. My mother's eyes were red, but she tried to hide her tears as she told us, "We will survive. We must." But I could see the fear behind her words. I left school soon after. From then on, my days began before dawn and ended long after sunset. I worked in the rice fields, carried heavy sacks of grain, and helped neighbors with odd jobs. The work was backbreaking, but the money was barely enough. Some days we had enough to eat, other days we went to bed hungry. Even in those hard times, I never stopped dreaming. I had heard stories of people who left Myanmar to work in other countries, Malaysia, Thailand, even as far as Singapore. They came back with enough money to build new houses, buy land, and send their children to school. One afternoon, a man from our village returned from Malaysia. His clothes were clean, his shoes new, and his pockets full. People gathered around him as he told stories of life abroad, The work was hard, but the pay was good. I listened to every word, my heart beating faster. Maybe, I thought, this was my chance. That night, I sat with my mother, Ame. I began, using the Burmese word for mother. I want to go to Malaysia. If I work there, I can send money home. We can fix the roof. We can send my brother and sister to school. Her eyes filled with worrying. Zov, you are still so young. The world outside is dangerous. You don't know what's out there. I know, I said softly, but we can't keep living like this. I have to try. We talked long into the night. Finally, she nodded, though her eyes were wet with tears. If you must go, then go, but promise me you will come back. We borrowed money from relatives, sold a small piece of land, and scraped together just enough to pay a broker who could arrange the trip. Since I didn't have a passport, I would have to travel legally. I knew the risks, being caught, sent back, or worse, but I had no other choice. The journey was long and terrifying. I traveled with a group of strangers, crammed into the back of a truck. The heat was suffocating, the air thick with the smell of sweat and fear. We drove for hours along rough roads, stopping only when absolutely necessary. At night, we crossed rivers in small wooden boats, the moonlight glinting on the dark water. There were moments when I thought I wouldn't make it. We hid in jungles to avoid police checkpoints, mosquitoes biting our skin until it burned. Some people turned back, too scared to go on, but I kept moving, thinking of my mother, my siblings, and the promise I had made. When Ashley arrived in Malaysia, I was exhausted, hungry, and completely alone. I didn't speak the language, I didn't know anyone, and I had no place to stay. My first nights were spent on the floor of a small, crowded apartment shared by other workers. The ground was hard, and the air was heavy with the smell of sweat, cooking oil, and damp clothes. After days of searching, I found work at a construction site. The job was grueling, carrying cement bags that felt heavier with each step, climbing scaffolding under the burning sun, and mixing concrete until my muscles screamed in pain. My hands blistered, my back ached, and my body was covered in dust every day. But I earned money, not much, but enough to send home. Slowly, life began to change for my family. My mother could buy fresh vegetables. My brother and sister could stay in school. The holes in our roof were patched. Still, life in Malaysia was far from easy. There were days when I went hungry so I could save more money. There were nights when loneliness pressed down on me like a weight. I missed home. I missed my father's voice, my mother's cooking, the sound of my siblings laughing. One day, something happened that shook me to my core. I was working high up on a building when my foot slipped on a wet plank. For a moment, I felt the world tilt beneath me. I saw the ground far below. My heart stopped. Then, a strong hand grabbed my arm, pulling me back. My coworker, a man from Bangladesh, had saved my life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I realized how fragile life was, and how I didn't want to spend it only surviving. I decided I needed a plan. I began saving every coin I could. I stopped buying small luxuries, walked instead of taking buses, and ate simple meals. After many months, I had enough to start a small food stall selling snacks and drinks to workers. At first, business was slow. Some days, I sold nothing at all, but I refused to give up. I greeted every customer with a smile, remembered their names, and treated them with kindness. Slowly, people began to return, word spread. While little stall grew, years passed, I expanded to more stalls and hired other workers, people who, like me, had once been lost and desperate. I built a proper home for my mother. I sent my brother to college and helped my sister open a tailoring shop. Looking back, I realized my journey was never just about money. It was about resilience, sacrifice, and hope. I started in a small, forgotten village, but I learned that no dream is too big if you are willing to fight for it. If you are listening to my story, remember this: life will test you, it will push you to the edge. But if you keep going, even when every part of you wants to stop, you will one day look back and see how far you've come, just like I did.